welcome. It's time for Nolan Knows, and this is the lightning round. Cuts to food stamps will only hit 4 states. The Republicans are trying to trim spending. You know what this really proves? It really proves that the federal government is not particularly good at philanthropy. They can't be discerning and they don't do it well. Next on the list, Hollywood's vaccine wars. LA's entitled West Siders are behind the city's epidemic. Apparently, parents aren't taking their children to get vaccinated. Thank you, Jenny McCarthy. Is that Dr. Jenny McCarthy? No, she's not a doctor. But she instilled fear into these parents. Now these kids are developing whooping cough. Get your kids vaccinated. Next, the Border Patrol is going to begin testing body cameras. I like this idea. I think all law enforcement should have body cameras. There was a time when if you had a you said, they said with law enforcement in court, the judge always took the side of the law enforcement officer. Well, now you've got a camera. I think it's a good idea. Next on the list, Joan Rivers' doctor took a selfie. It's the same doctor that did the biopsy just before Joan Rivers passed away. I have a theory about this. I don't think she died on the operating table. I think she died in recovery, because if she was still on the table, they would have had an oxygen sensor testing her blood, making sure she was still breathing. That alarm would have gone off. We'll soon find out, but I think it's major incompetence. Next on the list is free bread at restaurants are becoming an endangered species. Apparently they went after Olive Garden and tried to get them to drop their all-you-can-eat bread and salad bar. You know, let people decide what they want to eat, and if they want to eat the carbohydrates, let them. If it makes money, that's what they're in business for. Leave them alone. Next on the list is a story about surrogates and the maze of laws they have to face depending on what state they're in. I kind of like the idea of letting each state write their own laws, come up with their own rules. They do it now with manslaughter, traffic tickets, everything. And there's no reason why they shouldn't do it with this as well. You know, eventually the best laws will settle down and they'll spread throughout the country. What we don't need is the federal government to come up with a one-size-fits-all law to cover the entire country. Next on the list, Apple says their internet operating system, the iOS 8, will shield your data from police. Apparently, with the old system, if the police came to them with a subpoena and said, give us the password to somebody's account, they were able to do it. They have very smartly written this system so that they can't do it. That's a good thing. Once again, it's not Apple that I'm afraid of. It's the government that I'm afraid of. And look at that, the free market found a way to protect me. Another story on our lightning round list is from Texas. Apparently they are executing or have executed a woman for the starvation of a 9-year-old boy. Well, certainly nobody is in favor of starving a 9-year-old boy or killing anybody in any manner. But I'm also not in favor anymore of the government killing people. They get so many things wrong so often. The whole system of jurisprudence is designed to let the guilty go free before we incarcerate or punish the innocent. You know, if you make a mistake with the death penalty, you can't let them go free. Next on the lightning round is the Facebook rule that says you have to use your real name. And apparently some transgender cross-dressers are using some surrogate names. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but Facebook has a rule and it says you have to have your real name. It's a private company. Whatever their rules are, those are the ones you have to live by. If you don't like it, create your own Facebook and use all the aliases you want. Our story of the week this week is Scotland and independence. Scotland had a chance to separate itself from the United Kingdom. They turned it down, and by a pretty substantial margin. And I kind of wish they'd taken advantage of the opportunity to separate themselves, because I think British colonialism has screwed up the whole world. Much of the Middle East, where all the fighting is going on now, is the result of their colonialism. They're the ones that divided up those countries and created enemies out of people who at one time weren't enemies. Scotland had a chance to undo that this past week. They had an opportunity to separate themselves. I didn't like what they were going to do. They were going to run the oil companies. Actually, the state was going to run the oil companies, use the proceeds to pay for health care. I don't think it would have worked in the long run, but I think they're entitled to try. It is, after all, their country, and it's time they got it back. all of the fear-mongering about what was going to happen to the economy, all the scares about whether or not they'd have national security, it all would have worked out fine. All of those colonies, all of those countries should be free of entanglements with Great Britain. It's time we end the colonization of the whole world. It's a long since failed plan. Give Scotland back to the Scots. That's what I think. It's Nolan Says No, and it has to do with the White House and the Secret Service. You know, the Secret Service have been under fire for the last year or so. They've been making a lot of pretty serious mistakes. I would argue the serious mistakes they made in this past week are the most serious of all. Nobody dislikes President Obama more than I do. I can't think of anything he's done right on purpose, and the things he's done right by accident, I would argue he stumbled into. But the fact is, he's the President of the United States of America, and he needs to be protected. We have, or he would have as president, enemies, both foreign and domestic. Nobody should be getting over the fence, across the front lawn, and through the front door without somehow being stopped. The Secret Service was asleep here, and don't think that our enemies weren't watching. Don't think for a minute that those radical Islamists weren't watching that video when it played on television and thinking to themselves, wow, who would have thought we'd have a chance like that? They'll try to take advantage of it. They'll learn from this guy's mistakes, or rather from his success. The Secret Service needs to double down, put down more dogs, put out more men. They need to keep scouring the lawn. They need to protect this man. He is the President of the United States of America, and some nutbag with a pocket knife ought not make it to the front door of the White House. This segment of the program is called If They Were Here, and the they this week is Ray Rice. He's been in the news a lot. In fact, the NFL has been in the news a lot. If Ray Rice were here, I would tell him how little I respect him. I don't respect any man that hits a woman. I've never hit a woman. I've never had cause to. The fact is, getting this guy out of work, to get him unemployed, to force him out of his job really doesn't help things. I don't think it helps with his wife. The truth is, he went to court. He was adjudicated. He was sent to get some therapy, and he's done all that. The woman that he hit forgave him. They're now married. So what have we in the general public done with our outrage over his actions? We have now caused him to be unemployed. Hey, that'll be good for the marriage, won't it? Nothing makes things smooth in the matrimonial world than an unemployed spouse. The fact is, if you don't like what happened, if you don't like this football player or that team, you don't go to their games or you don't tune in. But I think we could offer up a little bit of forgiveness when somebody steps out of line. I think this rush to judgment, this crowd mentality to force this guy out of work is wrong. It's wrong on a whole variety of levels. You know, I want you to imagine a scenario where you're the spouse of an NFL football player who's hit you. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not in favor of that kind of activity. I just don't think that you should end up with an unemployed spouse as the result of it. I don't see where that helps. Most marriages, the divorce is about money, and now you're going to open up your mouth and say something, and your husband's going to be unemployed. I would argue some women might not say anything, just go ahead and take the beating. The solution here is for us not to have a crowd mentality. If you don't like what the football player has done, if you don't like the football team, treat it like you would a restaurant you don't like. Don't go. Don't buy tickets. Don't watch them on TV. But let's not force these people to lose their jobs. I don't think that's the solution. This is the much vaunted segment of the program called the Squirrel of the Week, and it deals with the San Diego taxi cab drivers. Apparently, the city takes it upon themselves to grant permission to drive a cab, and they have some rules and regulations of their own. Some of these rules really stink. In fact, the rules actually do stink. They've written a rule that says you can't get your license to drive a taxi cab if you have body odor. Well, what are they going to do? Are they going to sniff people's armpits every day, or is this going to be a once a month surprise check? Are they going to just walk into your cab and say, "Lift 'em and let me smell"? Now, this is the silliest thing I have ever heard, but this is what happens when the government tries to license the private marketplace. Frankly, if I jumped in a cab and the driver stunk to high heaven, I'd hop right out about as quickly, or I'd tolerate the smell, knowing that, after all, I wouldn't have to carry him with me wherever I went for the rest of the day. But the city has deemed it their job to make sure that your cab drivers in California and San Diego don't smell bad. Well, there's a job that stinks.